make sure we get all your info right. Yeah, for the recording. Awesome. Okay. So, and if either of you glitch out, let me know and we can send another link. Okay.
You have 2 orders you're collecting today.
So, welcome everybody to ArtEvolve. If you guys just want to mute yourselves as we go, I think because you're both in offices, it's probably, I think there might just be an echo on my side. Welcome to ArtEvolve, July 14th. So midsummer. Hope everyone's keeping cool. Yes. And today we're going to be doing future-proofing with fine art shipping. So I'm really excited about this one. This is with one of our more recent clients who's come on, who is YSDS, or your Special Delivery Service. David, there's no 3 of you.
This is Matt Arkell.
Okay, great.
And I think he did the same. Matt is the head of our art team here in New York. He did the same where he probably used my panelist link.
That is correct.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, yeah, so Emma's gonna shoot you another link, David, just in case they prefer. It's up to you. Today we're gonna be talking about future-proofing fine art shipping. And I am Mackenzie. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. And I'm the CCO of ArtEcheck, and we now have many guests with us today. We have David, who's Business Development Manager at YSDS Art.
3 of them. Right?
We have Gus, who's another Business Development Manager with YSDS Art. And then, David, will you do the other intros for me, please? Oh, you're on mute.
And Anatina was the second David, who joins us from Zurich, where she just rose to the role of Director of Operations in Zurich, one of our handful of European offices, and Matt, who really built the YSDS art operation here in New York over the years, and heads that department here in New York and in the US for all intents and purposes. That was Matt, the third David.
Fantastic. Good. So we'll get all the info so that we can include them in the recording. Thanks for joining, and feel free to turn your videos on, guys, if you're joining as a panelist, and otherwise Emma will send you a link so that you have access if you just wanted to hang out and watch. So why don't you all tell me a little bit about yourselves? I know we got the quick intro now, but a little bit about your background and what kind of brought you to fine art shipping. That would be great to hear. Gus, do you want to head us off?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'd like to start off just by giving everyone here a bit of a background about YSDS, just to give everyone a sense of who we are. YSDS is a global shipping logistics company. We specialize in moving really all of the world's most precious goods. The company was founded in Sweden over a decade ago or so, and has since grown to have a presence in really every major shipping hub throughout the world. YSDS actually has several different areas of expertise, so including healthcare, specialty logistics, and a few more. But David and I really focus on the art shipping aspect of the company. And I started my career in the art world. I've worked for many of the auction houses throughout my career, and through that, worked with quite a few different fine art shippers, so have some experience in the space. And I can say quite confidently that partly due to YSDS's diversified exposure to different markets, we're somewhat uniquely positioned to give insight onto future-proofing the art market and shipping, as well as how global issues can affect the shipping market, not just for art, but really as a whole. So it's a fantastic company to work for, and one that's, I think, doing quite a bit to revolutionize how shipping is done, especially in the art industry, through both technology and changing operations a little bit and adapting to what really is a ever-changing landscape in the shipping industry and really in the world as we know it. I think everyone can acknowledge that the past 2 or 3 years have seen the world change quite a bit. And with that comes a lot of change for every industry. And I think YSDS is poised to really be at the forefront of that. So I'm excited to have a chance to discuss that today. My background, as I said earlier, is really within the art space. I've held quite a few positions really within the auction world. And what brought me to YSDS was the experience actually of really booking a lot of traveling exhibitions for the position I had when I was at Christie's, and realizing just how complex and convoluted the art shipping space can oftentimes be. And what was very frustrating is how opaque it can be as well. It's very difficult sometimes to get great customer service, great insight into how shipments actually are traveling, where shipments are. And what I found is that at YSDS, we're really acting and striving to change that day to day, whether that be through personal interactions. I pride myself on my customer service, or if it's based on our technological advancements or operational advancements. I think we're really leading the way in changing how art shipping is done and making it just really a better place for every client that we interact with, which I'm really happy to talk about today and talk about some of the things that we're doing to bring this process forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Gus. That was a great intro. David?
Okay, thanks. I came to YSDS from another fine arts shipper, where I was for years, grew into the role of heading up the auction department, and shipped for interior designers, private collectors, museums, galleries, the auction houses, of course, and basically every client and every type of sensitive, valuable, fragile item, or that otherwise needed some type of special care and attention. I have loved art and art history and visual culture my whole life. It was only in my late 20s I decided I was going to go pursue this passion, go back to school, get a master's degree, possibly pursue a PhD and be an academic or be a curator, and very quickly realized I really wanted to be around art and objects and artists, and be sort of on the ground, and that the dynamic of a sort of a normal job was a better fit, a better feel. I never, when I was a kid, I didn't want to be in art logistics when I grow up. That would be super cool if there's kids out there who were saying that to their parents. I'm not sure I knew what that world was like, or what was involved, but I took the passion for art. I took the great fit and feel of the dynamic of what we do, both problem solving, client facing, and as we're discussing today, contingency planning for the future, putting the pieces of the puzzle together to be really rewarding and fulfilling. And I'm really relishing doing that and thinking about these things that we're talking about today. And that's very much a part of what my and Gus, in addition to Matt and Anatina's role here is at YSDS. As the company grows, a big part of that is addressing how do we best address in a cost-effective, efficient, safe, best practices manner the needs of our clients in a changing world, a fast changing world, a world that's changing in many ways, not least on the logistics front. So I look forward to getting more into that as we talk.
Wonderful. Thanks, David. And Anatina, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. I work for YSDS here in Switzerland, and we have one of the bigger art markets, YSDS, besides the US team. So we really focus on shipping and working with most galleries and auction houses here in Switzerland, which for a small country, we have a lot of artsy companies in this small country. And I think what's special as well for Switzerland is that we're doing all the crating and all the packaging in-house, same as YSDS in the US. But it's not that common to have that in Switzerland. So that's, I think, what makes it very special for us here in Switzerland. I don't have too much background on arts, but it's really interesting to dive into that and to learn so much about it.
Definitely. So for everyone who's attending, if you have anything you want to contribute to the conversation as we move forward, feel free to pop into the chat. I'll try to bring your thoughts into the conversation. If you have a question that you want to ask, I'll either bring it in as we go or at the end, depending on what type of question it is. And so feel free to kind of participate as much as you'd like. So today we're talking about, right, future-proofing of fine art shipping. So the way that we're going to kind of do this is talk about some of the biggest concerns in future-proofing for fine art shipping in particular. We're going to look at it sort of through the eyes of a particular case. What are the issues that you need to be aware of? And then how do you actually future-proof for those issues, both ones that are happening now and then ones that could happen in the future, in order to prevent any any risks that could be associated with those things. So I think the first one that we're going to talk about is conflict. So this is obviously a big one on people's minds with everything going on in Ukraine right now, but it's something that happens, in different corners of the world at different periods of time. And so let's talk a little bit about, what are the shipping challenges when you have a conflict that, involves a lot of global players, even like Ukraine.
Sure. Thank you, Mackenzie. So these are issues that come up that are especially challenging because they are completely unpredictable and are difficult to plan for in the way that economic issues such as fuel prices, environmental challenges. You want to be greener as an operation. How do you address those things? How do you navigate moving forward with different approaches to address environmental concerns? These type of conflicts that come up quickly are unpredictable and require quick reactions to address and navigate are particularly difficult. What we look at here and what we want to talk about here is basically what sort of, kind of jumping ahead to the end here, but it sort of becomes one of the conclusions to come out of this in general in terms of future proofing, which is accepting and embracing the fact that as an operation, whether you're a huge institution or a small gallery, that if you want to be able to effectively navigate these things, from deciding to be green or to navigating a armed conflict, you need to, again, embrace and make a very deliberate decision to make this part of your operation, to early on and in a comprehensive way understand the options that are available to you to navigate these things, which means working closely with your logistics partners to understand, again, all of your options, all of your alternative approaches when certain approaches become unavailable or not feasible. And to me, that means that, you know, a lot of the clients we work with tend to cast a very wide net, shipment to shipment, where you're simply trying to get the best price for a certain level of service, on a certain timeline to get your goods from A to B. I think when we talk about future proofing and we talk about things as unpredictable as these type of conflicts, there's a very strong case here for having, you know, special relationships, close partnerships with a smaller group of logistics partners with whom you've built meaningful relationships, where you're not just engaging a partner, an agent, shipment to shipment, but you are establishing or have established and you maintain a meaningful consultative relationship where when these things arise, you then have the ability to have meaningful discussions as part of a contingency plan on how to navigate these things. That means registrars and senior admins and other individuals who are making these decisions and having these conversations need to insist on establishing these relationships and putting these plans in place, which means engaging stakeholders above and below, the principal of your gallery, the heads of departments at auction houses, the presidents of departments at museums, to understand that there needs to be a balance between budget and establishing and maintaining meaningful relationships that are going to be a crucial part of contingency planning.
Yeah,
and
I think
to not look at logistics on a case-by-case basis, but implement a logistics program that, again, includes maintaining meaningful relationships with a select group of trusted partners.
Yeah, I think, David, just to piggyback off of that a little bit, and you know, I think part of the shipping world is that, look, people don't really think about shipping until they do, until it's absolutely necessary. It's not necessarily the most glamorous part of the art market, but it's a very necessary one. And we all understand that, you know, shipping might not be glamorous, it might not be fun, but when something like a global conflict arises that causes significant issues for the shipping industry, you need to be prepared. And the best way to go about that is, as David said, to have a good relationship with your shipping experts and use them not just as, you know, someone who you call when you're ready to book a shipment, but use them as an advisor. We have expertise in this area for a reason. We've had many years experience here and know what to do when these conflicts or situations arise. And, you know, when something totally unknown happens or something that's entirely out of your control, it's crucial that an action plan is there. So I would urge everyone here just to take a look at how you go about shipping items, who actually owns those shipments, and be a little bit more proactive when you're going into maybe a major sale week, maybe a major exhibition that you're opening, and think about what might happen if, you know, something does occur that's going to prevent me from shipping these pieces to X country. And whether that is shipping something via different means, whether that's going air freight or shipping something via ocean freight, or whether that just means, look, you have to have a plan in place to do some damage control with clients that may be frustrated that these shipments are going to take a little bit longer. It's important to think these things through proactively. And, you know, I know it's not fun, but it's going to cause a lot less pain further down the line if you think about these things a little bit earlier on in the process than, a week before you actually have to ship them. So I think David made a lot of great points there, and it's about being proactive and understanding the difficulties that could be faced when something like a global conflict arises. It's going to prevent shipping lines from being open for, in some cases, quite a long time.
Yeah, so it's having that crisis management plan sort of in place already that you've collaborated on with your shipper to be able to understand what to do or what would happen if something were to occur, right? And I think we are living through this age, right, where there's a lot of things that happen seemingly one after another that can affect sort of the global supply chain in so many different ways. So, look at pandemics and the quarantines that come from them, even in different parts of the world, and then things like Ukraine and massive weather phenomena and things like that, right? Where you really can't know what's going to happen in advance, and you only find out when you need to have already had sort of this plan in place, right?
Exactly, and I think an example that I sometimes like to think about is when we were all young, our parents told us what to do if we ever saw a fire happening in the house. Stay low, touch the wall before you try and go through a door, all of these different things that happen. And you have that ingrained in yourself because you've learned it from a young age and you've prepared. That sort of disaster plan is something that's kind of akin to this discussion, where it's important to have that same level of preparedness when going into a major sale or exhibition, understanding that there could be things in place that will prevent you from shipping these pieces wherever you might be planning to, and doing so before you get to a point where it's too late and you're in a very tricky situation, which does happen. And frankly, your shipper, whether it's YSDS or another person, will do whatever we can to help you through those, but it's going to be a lot more difficult if you haven't prepared early on.
Yeah. I think the other thing too that we've seen with a lot of our clients is that having documentation before they send something away to the other side of the world is really important, right? So actually having, well, obviously for our clients' case, it's condition reports and ArtEvolve, but having some sort of, knowledge of what it is that's going on with that piece before it goes abroad and maybe won't come back for a while, right? Because of whatever's going on in the world, can be pretty important. Yeah. Because you don't know how long something's going to be there. You don't know where it's going to be stored. You don't know, who it's maybe even going to be stored with if a crisis does occur. So you want to be able to sort of reduce the risk of actually knowing, what condition your piece left in, so that when it comes back.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ties nicely into ArtEvolve, and using your services is something that we've been doing for now, I would say a few months. We've just come on with you guys, but it's been a major benefit for our shipments just alone, because what it does allow us to do is give our clients a very clear picture of exactly what the condition their shipment was before we send it away. And like you said, documentation is crucial, especially in a case like this where you don't necessarily know where it will be for quite a bit. If it, let's say, lands in a country and a conflict has suddenly arisen, it's stored at the airport, stored in an escrow facility, wherever it might be. When it comes out the other side, it's very nice to have that real record of exactly what condition it was in before it left. And beyond that, I think the other crucial aspect of this is making sure that your documentation in terms of customs clearance, in terms of really all of those aspects is done correctly. Again, it's not a fun thing to do. It's something that I would urge everyone here to talk with an expert about before you go into shipment. It's not as simple as just booking a FedEx or DHL. It's not like that. It is quite complex. International trade is difficult. There are a lot of complexities that go into these things, whether it's traveling via carnet, whether it's traveling via a separate sort of entrance situation. That there are a lot of different aspects that can go into this. And frankly, I'm not even as much of an expert in that as I'd like to be. That's why I like to lean on David, Matt, who are real experts in this. And it's crucial that if you don't necessarily know exactly what you're doing, please reach out to an expert, because a lot of things can go wrong in those situations. And counting your ducks and making sure that everything is set before you send that shipment out is incredibly important.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I mean, shame. While we're shamelessly plugging, there should be no shame, of course. I was first introduced to ArtEvolve during a crisis time, and because of a crisis time, which was COVID. A major auction client had the habit for insurance purposes of, if they needed to get goods out of a client's home in a place where they did not necessarily have employees, agents, people on the payroll who could physically be present. To go back a bit, there was a policy for insurance purposes that when goods of a certain value, fragility, or even just for customer service perspective, needed to be sent from a client's home to auction, they would have somebody physically there to oversee the packing and handling. The insurance company said, that will satisfy the requirements of your insurance policy. We're happy with that. Well, during COVID, you couldn't just send people to people's homes to hang out and watch something get packed. Not only that, but we're dealing with a situation now with air travel and fuel prices where it's simply not feasible from a budgetary perspective to every time you need to get goods out of somebody's home in Kansas City or Minneapolis or Milwaukee, to send somebody physically to site for, an important but quite a simple role to watch a process unfold. It was ArtEvolve as a product and process that I first became familiar with the availability of doing a remote condition report. And the client actually asked that we use ArtEvolve for that purpose. And from my understanding, it was the insurance companies who looked at ArtEvolve and looked at the process and said, okay, you don't need to send people to site anymore. You can use ArtEvolve. Again, shameless plug, but what is this all to say? That sure, you can address these things as they come up. But there's no reason why you as an art operation, however big or small, can't look, again, to Gus's point, look at logistics not as an ad hoc case-by-case thing. And we're speaking to galleries who smaller galleries might operate like that, shipment to shipment. What's the quickest, cleanest, cheapest way I can get this thing from A to B? Museums and major institutions might have a more comprehensive logistics program, but I would assert that in general, there isn't enough appreciation or attention paid to having, again, what I'm calling a comprehensive logistics program that involves contingency planning, that makes that engages all stakeholders to address the fact that budgets and timelines may be affected by these things, and how do we address these things? So where does ArtEvolve come in? Well, ArtEvolve is a piece of technology that came along to address a need during a time of crisis. I think to bring it back, that needs to be part of a comprehensive logistics plan. Is constantly looking at what technology is out there that can help you navigate these things before and as they arise.
Agreed. And ArtEvolve is one of them, but there are a number of them, right, that you can kind of incorporate into shipping for sure. So even just there's so many really interesting sensors available out there right now and things like that. So the thing that you brought up, both Gus and David, a couple times, which I think is an important thing for institutions to think about, is that a lot of smaller institutions may not have condition reports for everything that they have in their collections, just because they don't have the bandwidth in their small team. It could be a small gallery, but it also could be like a private collection or an art foundation, or we're actually going to be at the World Art Foundation conference in Milan in the fall. And so we've been kind of thinking about this a lot, right? About these institutions who have a lot of precious works in their collection, but don't necessarily have the staff that like a big museum does. And so I think something that, all of those institutions can consider is that their shippers can do condition reports, So, and especially if they're using something with a guided approach like ArtEvolve, they have the ability to actually do a condition report that's going to be of the standard you can pass to your insurer if you needed to at some point. So I think that's something to consider, is that when you're talking about future proofing for shipment, you're also talking about risk mitigation as a whole, right? So future proofing fine art shipping is also future proofing your collection in a lot of ways. And so I think, you know, when we talk about, for example, a shipment being stopped by a large weather event happening, the same thing can happen when your collection is at home, right? And so a lot of these things that we're talking about will help in both cases, right? So also, if you have a, you know, tornado ripping through your town where, you know, half of your art collection is, can your shipper help you get it out of there, right? And so it's not just necessarily about bringing things home, but I think it's also having that plan to also get things out, especially as we kind of look in the face of climate change, you know, and things that are kind of being affected by that now. So, yeah. So let's
Part
talk
of this
about,
is collection management.
yeah,
Part of it is moving. Go ahead.
I was just going to say,
Kenzie.
you mentioned fuel prices a few times. I think that's a good one to kind of push us into talking a little bit about sustainability through the lens of fuel prices, kind of as our case study. So, I mean, what is the biggest issue with fuel prices for your clients? What problems does it cause?
What's the issue? We work with a lot of small to large galleries, very budget conscious. So, you know, surprise, the issue is budget. For us as a logistics company, from a sales and service perspective, our prices can't fluctuate with fuel prices on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Some companies build in a surcharge as a line item. Some don't. And to address Norwood's thing just off the cuff, for better or worse, there is no industry standard on how does my pricing change on a daily basis with fuel pricing. And unfortunately, our costs are affected by those things, right? So as a logistics company, we get hit. And again, some logistics companies are going to pass that right on to a client. And that needs to be, you know, again, that's a case for having a meaningful, trusted relationship with a shipper where you can have a dialogue around that, rather than you need to ship something, you need to ship it quickly, having to cast a wide net to find somebody who can do this thing on budget and on time. You know, I think the bottom line is budget, and working with all the stakeholders involved to message that fuel prices, for example, can and will affect your costs. And if that means that you need to start exhibiting artists that have studios and operations closer by, that's a, you know, that's a meaningful thing that you can do. If that means you need to choose forms of transportation that use less fuel, and timelines are affected, that's something that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry, Gus, I was just going to say, what are you referencing exactly in terms of choosing types of transit and timelines?
I think the big one that comes up is sea freight versus air freight. Now, you know, there's a big debate around it. I mean, everyone knows which is quicker. There's debates around which is really greener. Sea freight is typically cheaper. Typically takes longer. Is the bottom line there around those considerations. So if budget is your priority, and and I'm kind of skirting around the green issue, which is hotly debated around sea freight, we can get to. Then perhaps if you're looking at an economy, at a landscape where fuel prices are high and unpredictable, you're forward planning for your next year of exhibitions, if that's how long in advance you're able to plan, needs to revolve around the timelines of sea freight. It's about balancing what your priorities and your needs are. And that's simply the reality as you look to juggle priorities. I thought I froze, but Mackenzie just stepped away.
No, I think it's funny, when
Go
you
ahead,
talk
Chris.
to this and being very clear on timeline, especially with regards to air freight and sea freight, one thing that we are seeing right now is a very real result of the rise in fuel cost is that oftentimes now quoting can be quite varied just based on the span of a week or so. I recently had a quote that was a shipment going to Japan, and within the course of 1 week, the quote actually changed to about $3,000. So fuel costs are a very real aspect of the shipping industry right now. And while this is a period of incredibly high volatility, it is something that I would urge everyone to be quite conscious of and understand that time is somewhat of the essence in these situations. I think we've all gone through that and understand that we are in a period of strong economic volatility, but to David's point, planning ahead and making sure that you're prepared for that is crucial.
I know there are institutions or museums and institutions and galleries out there that are planning 1 to 3 years ahead. And so for you to tell them that something has doubled, tripled in price and, you should stop, you shouldn't show, you shouldn't go ahead with that exhibition of Japanese contemporary art, it could be a non-starter. But there's extremes you get to in terms of fuel prices and transit timing, that where suddenly these are very real considerations that need to be made. And I, again, to sort of address some of these questions live, John, that's really interesting that you asked that outright, because the answer is yes. And we've had more and more formal meetings as of lately about consolidation. And of course, as I'm sure you and your associates and colleagues in the business know, that really, clients aren't interested in consolidation, as a concept. They're interested in getting their stuff to where it needs to go on their timeline. There has to be a way where consolidated transit timings, sea, air, truck, can be messaged, that disparate institutions and galleries and stakeholders can perhaps plan backwards from what the logistics allow you to do, or at least find a middle ground. So I guess, I mean, the extreme would be, I'm going to plan my life around what my shipper is able to do and how much that's going to cost. Well, that doesn't seem very practical. Nor should a cultural institution be asked to do that. What it comes back to is planning ahead and having meaningful relationships with fewer logistics partners, where you can work together to develop these type of plans and contingency plans well in advance.
Yeah. So Anatina, I know that there's obviously kind of a particular situation going on in Europe with this question, you know, of prices and budgets, and it's probably a little bit of a different conversation in Switzerland. So kind of what have you been seeing in terms of dealing with kind of these rising costs?
Yeah, definitely the cost consciousness, and that we're focusing a lot on consolidated pickups and deliveries. I think that's the biggest point. And yeah, I mean, as we talked about the fuel surcharges before, they are just going through the roof here as well. So yeah, it's just a lot of communication with the clients and really, you know, being upfront with them and honest and making sure that, yeah, they understand the ongoing situation and the impact it has on all the different parts of the business.
Definitely. So I think, you know, when we're looking at this in the short term, right, it definitely is about budget. And then when we look at it in the long term, we do kind of then get into the sustainability discussion, right? Because obviously part of the reason fuel prices are rising, right, is we don't have sort of alternative sources of energy and things like that. So if we're looking at, I guess, supporting sustainable initiatives now going forwards so that they become, you know, the norm instead of the exception, in what parts of shipping can someone sort of adjust their practices to be more sustainable for future proofing? Gus, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, frankly, there are quite a few ways that YSDS is actively looking into that. A large push is obviously changing from using gasoline vehicles to electric vehicles, which is still in somewhat of the nascent stages. I'm sure all of you are aware of major companies like Tesla, Lucid Motors that are all developing either semi-autonomous or autonomous electric vehicles and semi-trucks. So investigating that is something that we've been very heavily involved in, not only for art transport, but also for specialty logistics and life science. It's, I think, probably the way that we will be moving in the future. However, timelines for that are somewhat subject to the whim of other corporations, not us. So as a smaller shipping company or any shipping company, really, we need to focus on consolidation in a lot of ways and encouraging our clients to move that way. Currently, that is the simplest way that you can go about reducing your carbon footprint and trying to be a little bit more environmentally conscious in these shipments. Another simple way is by reusing crates. This is a simple one, it gets discussed, but oftentimes it's not done. Really, when we're building our crates, we build them to a level of standard where they are built to be reused. They oftentimes are not stored because storing a crate takes up some space, but thinking about that a little bit more proactively in advance can help reduce your footprint. There are a few key things that are quite simple like that I think can be done. But as we've been discussing throughout this entire discussion, it's really based on being a bit more proactive about your shipping costs, shipping footprint, and shipping practices. For example, if you are going to try and consolidate, that does take a little bit longer. That's the nature of it. If you're jumping onto a major shipment with a few other galleries, obviously everyone is subject to one timeline. It does reduce a little bit of your autonomy, which can be a negative factor for some people. And you know, while there are certain cases that pop up where you do need something delivered the next day, 2 days from now, planning a little bit in advance in almost every case can really help with those situations and help you to be part of a consolidated shipment and reduce your overall impact. Really, I think there are other factors that we are looking into right now. The fact is, it's still a difficult industry to be in, and there are quite a few challenges that I think the logistics space is working towards. Whether that be moving more into ocean freight, that's a larger discussion as to how ocean tankers actually move. There's a discussion of whether it's more fuel efficient for them to move slowly or more quickly. So either burning more fuel over a longer period of time or moving a little bit quicker, burning more fuel for a shorter period. There are two different kind of ways of thinking on that. Largely, it depends on the shipping line. So for particular shipping lines, it actually makes more sense, especially in the Mediterranean, to ship more slowly. Going transatlantic, it's generally more fuel efficient to go faster. So there are a lot of these sort of more niche discussions that happen that aren't necessarily relevant to a gallery or an auction house specifically, but they are things that I think are kind of fascinating to discuss within the larger global logistics space, and something that YSDS, and I'm sure every major, or I hope every major shipper, is finally attuned to, because it is the way of the future and something that I think we all need to be quite focused on.
Definitely. I think, conversations like that don't always come up, I think, when we're talking about things like ocean freight. So
No.
it is important to look at it kind of from all angles. In terms of, fuel prices, I think whenever we talk about fuel prices, you immediately think of vehicle, right? That's moving. But obviously, fuel prices affect everything, including electricity and storage of art. So David, do you want to talk a little bit about how you can kind of decrease your carbon footprint with warehousing, where you keep your stuff?
Sure.
Yeah. So I know, for
wasn't-
example, YSDS New York, the warehouse is sort of has a lower carbon footprint than average, right?
Yeah. To be honest, I was not prepared to talk about it, but I can and I will. And I mean, I think it goes to what Gus was saying about simply, and something I wanted to touch on is simply, I think as an industry, we need to do a lot better of working together. I think shippers first, and then registrars and logistics professionals at the operations themselves need to do a better job of collaborating on setting standards and discussing what do we want to ask of ourselves in terms of setting up a storage operation. What does the output of our HVAC look like? What does what are the emissions of my operation? To when you are setting up an operation, to make recycling, reusing crates, a fundamental part of your operation, not just as a nice thing to do, but to more and more, both as an industry or at least as a single company, to make a commitment to these things, a sustained and comprehensive commitment. To look at, sure, there are best practices in terms of using certain materials when packing and handling certain goods, but there are always greener alternatives in terms of packing materials, for example, where you may not be sacrificing as much care as you might fear. So these alternatives need to be available. If we're talking about a storage facility, there needs to be a commitment to minimizing the carbon footprint of that operation. Consolidation comes up as well in terms of where do you choose to keep your art. There's economies of scale in keeping art in one single big huge centralized warehouse. There's an argument for keeping it local, so when it moves in and out, it doesn't have to go far. It comes back to looking at what is my operation going to look like, and again, and planning ahead, understanding what's involved, what are my priorities, and planning ahead to make sure those things get addressed.
Yeah, definitely. I think something interesting you were talking about in terms of packaging and sacrificing care, right? I think the other day I was at Our Time on Earth, which is an exhibition at the Barbican, which is kind of looking at the future options of what we could do in terms of sustainability from an art perspective. And so that was really interesting. I went actually with some other members of the ArtEvolve team, but something that Annika brought up while we were there is this idea of mushroom packaging, which is becoming kind of a concept, right? But I think a lot of people do have questions about, is this actually going to affect my, my painting in any way by it being stored in mushroom packaging? So I think kind of the more sort of social proof we have of these things being effective and working and being safe and having the appropriate level of care, then the more they're going to be used, right?
And we need thought leaders, industry leaders to champion these things. Not which means that we need to work together and listen to each other. I mean, to oversimplify. I mean, but yeah, I mean, the art handling, art shipping, logistics world is slow to evolve, largely out of fear, anxiety over the proper handling of very sensitive, very valuable objects. There has to be a very, very good reason to change the way things are being done, and a very good case for it if the way you've been doing things, again, in order to protect incredibly sensitive, incredibly valuable objects, is going to change. And we need to have a commitment to not just finding these things interesting and cute, but to consistently be looking at alternatives. If we are going to have a sincere commitment to being greener, reducing carbon footprints while managing budgets, navigating conflicts and concerns as they arise, there needs to be a sustained commitment to understanding alternative approaches to what we're doing now.
Yeah, definitely. So just bringing in one more question from the audience here before we wrap up. What are the most difficult expectations to meet for your clients? That was a good question.
That's a good one. I think we talked on it and touched on it in so many different ways, which is kind of a double answer. It's balancing budget and timeline. Nobody wants to or cares to be told that once they've been quoted a job and book it, that a few weeks later, when it's time to pick it up and pack it and move something along, that, oh, well, fuel prices have gone up and, your costs have now doubled. Okay, thanks. Here's your new invoice. This is a competitive industry. This is an industry, a space where expectations are very high, where budgets are tight and timelines are tight. And that's not something a client wants to hear or is necessarily even responsive to, which often means a logistics company takes a hit. So again, it comes back to the argument for having, rather than casting a wide net to drive prices down while trying to maintain some level of service for each and every shipment, to having a meaningful long-term relationships with a logistics partner.
So John actually turns this on its head. So he says, in many ways, shipping and logistics companies mostly react to the requests of clients. What would you ask clients that would make their lives easier, but they don't know it yet?
Sure, absolutely. That resonates all too well with me. I'm a people pleaser. I think our company is set up to be people pleasing in many ways. To address the question, what would we ask of clients that would make their lives easier, but they don't know it? I mean, and I hate to keep repeating myself, but stop asking everyone and their mother to quote the same shipment, to please manage up. Please do the hard work of managing up in terms of setting expectations with your principals, with all stakeholders. If you can go to work for me and explain to your boss that this is not feasible on this budget and timeline, our lives are gonna be a lot easier.
I think also,
You know,
what Beth
part
was
of me
saying earlier, right, about just coming to you sooner, right? So thinking in advance.
Yes, please come to us sooner. You know, there's part of me that has this little notion of like keeping everything local as well. I mean, every art operation wants to show the next meaningful exhibition, wants to have all the right artists in the next group show, wants to be the one to have the debut American show of a Hungarian contemporary artist. But what if there's a whole lot of great art and ideas being circulated where you are? And what if one of the simplest ways to reduce your footprint, save money, and manage conflict and future proof is to maybe think a bit more local? And now I'm getting to probably another big topic.
So actually, now that you speak about this, if
yeah,
anyone wants to check, and Emma will link this in the recording, we had a discussion about regional exhibition economies
sure.
During the pandemic. So that's something to think about. And you can look at that. It's outlined quite well, actually, by Bernadine Muller. So thank you all for joining us today. We're just a little bit over time, so I think I'm gonna have us sort of wrap up now. But thank you, David and Gus and Anatina, for joining us today and telling us, you know, all about the different things that we need to think about in terms of future proofing for fine art shipping and bringing your expertise from YSDS to ArtEvolve. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having us, and thanks to everyone for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.